Hello, hello, hello. Good afternoon, good evening, and good morning, everyone. Welcome to Creation Conversations, the show with the most questions and the most answers. I'm Sam. I'm filling in for Joe this week because he's having a little bit of a holiday. But with me today, as usual, we have our international director, John Mackay, and also
Sam,
we
you're
have
frozen.
Diane Eager.
Sorry to interrupt
I've
you, Sam.
frozen.
You're frozen. Yeah.
This is not
That's a different
acceptable.
movie.
Yes, we might get. The mouse might be on to us if we refer too much to it.
Copyright.
Copyright. But you guys.
Well, I'm okay because I'm unfrozen out here down under. It's pretty hard to be frozen in the middle of summer. But my wife, who I told you last week needed an operation, has just had it yesterday. So I'm very thrilled to tell you she's come through the operation. But of course, the surgeons were so glad they decided to go in yesterday because they actually found a hole in her gallbladder which was leaking. And apparently, according to the doctors, that could be a serious, serious problem. So we're praising the Lord that they got it in time. And we're looking forward to her feeling an awful lot better. So that's the good news. Of course, we're missing Joe this week. He's having a wonderful time away with his lovely wife. Someone offered them a lovely weekend. So thank you to all of you folks who stepped up and said, Joe, you need a holiday. We all agree. And, well, we're going to be telling you something about what Joe's been doing on the Isle of Wight, because some of you have been following that. But he's put together at least a nice summary of some of the important bits. But first of all, ministry report. You see, I brought in a couple of fossils today. This one here, do you recognize a nice fruit we have down here in the Southern Hemisphere? Ooh, it's actually a nut. I mean, look at that lovely face. Coconuts. That's a living one. They're all hairy like me, right? But see this one here? That's a fossil coconut. It's actually a miniature coconut. I dug that up on the North Island in New Zealand. Now, you know what's interesting? Coconuts will grow in warm countries like Australia. They'll grow in my backyard because I'm sort of just below the Tropic of Capricorn. The crocodiles live and move a couple of 100 kilometers north, but the coconuts will grow right down here, but they do a whole lot better up in the warm. These ones, well, that's a diminutive, mutated, degenerate, almost microscopic coconut. But if you get close up, you can actually see the 3 holes at the end as well. It's definitely a coconut, but coconuts don't grow in New Zealand anymore. We've got a theme coming up that's going to involve plants and the days of creation. And there's no doubt about it. There's one theme in the Bible that we've stressed over and over again. So forgive us if it sounds boring, but coconuts always turn into coconuts and they die out sometimes. Degeneration is the theme, not evolution. It's the opposite, devolution, the word that Richard Dawkins hates. But you see, you and I are doing, the reason my wife needed an operation is she's not evolving, she's degenerating. Don't tell her I said that. She can't hear the show in hospital this morning. Devolving is the word, going from good to bad to worse. And that's been our theme, and we will continue to make that theme because it's the one that looks forward to the Lord Jesus Christ, the Creator, remaking things, not re-evolving it, but recreating without the problems that cause devolution at the moment. Oh, one other fossil. You see, I went out just before the show and I grabbed that. Isn't that beautiful? It's lovely. The same as this plant. Look, I got this plant here out of the wall of a big road cutting. And when you chop it up, you get little sections that are like this. Now, there's no doubt about it, that is a beautiful section, a smaller one, of this one here, which we got from Chinchilla. Yep, that's a real town. It's not just that funny little white coated thing that you use for fur coats. This one here is from Chinchilla. I wrote it on the back so I wouldn't forget. It's a section of a tree fern. Now, as Diane will tell you, we have a lovely after their own kind garden in Gympie at Jurassic Ark. So don't forget to go to Jurassic Ark. You better put up that link there, Sam, so they know where it is. It's our creation museum, world's biggest outdoor fossil gardens, living gardens, fossil site, etc., with a creation theme. And we have tree ferns. We have some big tree ferns. but they still look exactly like tree ferns. Now, that's a theme that's going to come up over and over again, and it's got some important ramifications. As I've said time and time again, it's one reason I abandoned the theory of evolution, having been brainwashed with it from the start of high school right through to university. The evidence is clear, things have not evolved. But the evidence is also clear, John Mackay is going downhill. Yep, it's true as well. My poor wife has. Just continue to pray for her. That's where I'm at here in Queensland. Diane, what's it been like down there in Canberra?
Well, it is still summer here down in the Southern Hemisphere. This week we sent out our first email newsletter for the week. We've had a bit of a break during January because that's high summer down here. So it is the holiday time when the office staff can have a break. But things are winding up again. And so we've sent out our first newsletter. It's a big bumper edition with more than the usual items that we have. So I think people will really enjoy that. And just in case you don't get that, yesterday, Joseph and I made a little video about the items that are on it and some of the ministry news as well. And that will be put together and there'll be a link sent out. But in the meantime, if you'd like to get our newsletter, you can sign up for it on our main website.
Now, Diane, I believe that test program you did yesterday with Joseph is going to be a regular feature because people so love the program that Joe and you and Sam did on the evidence news. That's going to be a regular feature?
Yes. So we'll try and do that for each newsletter. Comes out every 2 or 3 weeks, depending on what's happening with the other events in the ministry. And so we'll make one of these little videos alongside the newsletter as well. So either way, get it as a newsletter that you can read or watch our little video and you'll find out what's happening out there in the scientific world and also what the ministry is doing.
So it's the creation news of the world with positives and blessings, and it's also what's wrong with evolution so that people can use it in their own backyards to tell people God's word is true from the beginning. So Sam, if you make sure folks can see where they can subscribe to that, it's free, and free is a great price. But of course, if you want to help us with free, then don't forget you can use the what's the name of the giving system that they have on this show, Sam?
Oh,
you know, where they put cups of coffee up and all that sort of stuff that doesn't make the slightest sense to me, but it apparently is catchy. What do they call it?
I think it's just called. I think there's you can send stickers and things like that. I mean, that's something fun, I suppose. Send monetary donations and things like that. Francesca, I am coming to you in the chat. Don't worry. My computer is playing up today, unfortunately. It's going really slow, but I will make sure to put, by the end of it, there will be a link to subscribe to the newsletter in the chat for you. And good to see you, buddy. Right, okay, so a little bit of a for you. We've got a cinematic experience. So we're going to roll that. This is just a little bit of a preview of what Joe has been up to last week, was it? Yeah, last week, over his trip to the Isle of Wight. So once this decides to load, goodness me, and John's frozen. Oh dear, it's just not gone well.
Oh no, it's moving now.
Right. Okay. Right. Okay. That's all good. Right. Okay. What I'm going to do, I'm going to play this for you guys. Hopefully it'll go, and we'll see you on the other side. Once it loads, there we go.
All right, well, good afternoon. It is the 22nd of January, at about 3:30 in the afternoon. It's unseasonably warm for January. You can see I've got shorts on and it's kind of clear blue skies as well. But the reason we're doing this is for a completely different reason. I'm actually going to be doing a road trip. Now, this is something which I've seen a few other people on YouTube and social media do, and we thought we'd give it a shot. We may never do it again, but who knows. Now, this is the first road trip of this kind that I've done in years, like over 3 years. It doesn't feel like that because part of that's because of the pandemic, right? But this is the first time that I'm going to be going on a road trip without my wife, Sarah Ann. She's currently got the camera behind you, but I will have to be fending for myself for over a week. What will I be doing on this road trip? Well, we'll be taking the trusty car all the way down to the Isle of Wight. And one of the things that we're going to do is a whole load of live videos. I've got all my fossil tools in there because we've got great fossils down on the Isle of Wight. We'll be doing a number of live videos, but we will also be filming, or I will be filming rather myself, sort of selfie stick style, some of our trips around the island, some of the geology, some of the archaeology, and as well as these live videos, we'll also be putting these up on YouTube and on Facebook at the end of every day, exploring a bit more of the geology and so on and so forth. What exactly are we doing? Come with me around here. Okay, maps. Here's the UK. Come up so you can see it. We are based around there, near Oswestry in Shropshire. Down there is the Isle of Wight. So we've got a fair distance to kind of drive from Oswestry down to the Isle of Wight. We're going to be going from Lymington, which is here, rather than the main one, which is Portsmouth. We'll be driving down. There's some great geology on the way, so I'm going to try and stop off and show you some of the geology as we go. We're going to get on the ferry tomorrow afternoon over to the Isle of Wight. I'll be staying down on the bottom of the island like this, and we're going to be travelling around the Isle of Wight, having a look at some of the fabulous geology down there. On the way back, we're also going to stop off on the Jurassic Coast. There's Lyme Regis just there. This whole Jurassic Coast is absolutely beautiful for the area. We're also finding out some information to see if we can do a creation research fossil hunting retreat there for several days later on in the year. So that's where we're kind of going on the road. Let's actually have a quick look at the Isle of Wight itself. I've got my wonderful geology map here. Let's get this spread out. Come and have a look at this. Lots of great colours. Probably doesn't mean a huge amount to everybody straight away, but to geologists like me, it means a great deal. Basically what we're looking at are two main types of rocks. You've got the greens and the blue rocks down here, and you've got the dark browns and the oranges up here. These are two very, very different types of rock and rock groups. Down the bottom here, we have all of the flood rocks. This is actually, a lot of this is known as the Wealden Flood Basin, even by secular geologists. There's lots and lots of chalk down here, there's lots of Cretaceous rocks, there's lots and lots of dinosaurs. In fact, this whole stretch of coast down here, from up here near Compton, all the way down here to Whale Chine, is known as the Dinosaur Coast. Dinosaur footprints, dinosaur bones, all the rest. And you've also got these Wealden flood deposits that come out over at Sandown and Yaverland just round here. You've got lots of other geology in the middle here as well. Great big chalk cliffs. This is the chalk cliffs that come all the way over here. You can see the famous needles up at this end of the map. But then on this top bit of the map, all this kind of, you know, browns and sort of the slightly darker coloured rocks, greys and sort of oranges and whatnot. This is what we would call Ice Age, glacial deposits and other kind of slumping clays that have dumped down into a great big basin and buried lots of fossils along there as well. Particularly over on this side of the island, this whole stretch, you've got Yarmouth here and Boldmore, great big Ice Age fossils from there. We've dug out some fabulous fossil skulls and lots of other things as well, all the way up to here along Thorness and up towards Cowes. Great fossils all along here. So I'll be travelling all over. I'll be seeing some friends as well, and we're going to be looking at some of their fossils. We're going to be having a look at some of the dinosaurs. We're going to be having a really great time over on the Isle of Wight, and that should be really, really quite fun. So what we're going to be doing is a few live videos like we do here today, as well as actually filming some of our travel, some of the things that we can't do live or stuff like that, briefly editing it together so you can kind of see not only me on my travels, but also some of the geology that we're looking at, some of the fossils that we've found, some of even the archaeology, because the Isle of Wight is so rich in its archaeology and Roman and what would be commonly referred to as prehistoric archaeology and everything else as well. There's some fabulous stuff there. So I'm going to be on my own, so the camera work may be interesting, but yeah, I'm looking forward to sort of a bachelor's road trip, as well as a chance to dig down into some geology and share all of my travels and experience with you. So we're starting early tomorrow morning, so we'll probably do a live video then. Tune in. We may do some live videos throughout the rest of the day, but in particular, watch for the end of day video, which we'll put out, which is sort of a pre-film brought all together throughout the day. And also join us on Friday evening. Creation Conversations will actually be in the hotel where I'll be doing this from. And so I'll have to bring you some of my finds, and I may even put up the video for that day on Creation Conversations as well. So join me then, catch you later, goodbye and God bless, and enjoy the road trip.
There we go.
Well, it really was a good trip, wasn't it? Of course, you saw that he used a road map because they don't yet mark fossils on GPS. So what can I say?
Yeah, I know. Turn left, dinosaur, fossil. I swear it's going to be a new update from TomTom or something like that in the future. Fossil hunting mode or something like that. So
even though you're frozen, Sam, we can hear you. So where did they actually see the rest of that series?
Well, uploaded the other day was a nearly 3-hour cut of everything. So you can watch it all in its entirety, all the extra bonus features, all the YouTube shorts, all thrown together into one big giant video. That's available on our YouTube channel. You can go to YouTube and search Creation Research, and you should be able to find us. So speaking of our YouTube, we have something special we've been cooking up for everyone. Those eagle-eyed among you who are watching on YouTube may have noticed that there might be a slight change to our logo. This is intentional. No one has hacked it. Don't worry. So once I can get onto this, my computer. I'm so sorry, everyone. My computer is just not wanting to play ball today. Right, there we go. All right, so let me play this for you, and this should hopefully explain all. So there we go, everyone. We have a new logo. I've been working on that for several months, I would say. I've been working on it in the background. So this is our official launch of the logo. So we hope you guys really like it. A lot of love and time has been put into making that just right for everyone. So John, Diane, what do you think of the new logo?
Well, I think it's great because it reminds me of the books we did for kids, featuring both Adam and the dinosaurs. So if you want to start with the young ones, by the way, you'll have to forgive us, the old logo is still on those books because we haven't updated yet, but the message is the same. Did you catch the man and the dinosaur? It's so important that people don't just think that's the Flintstones on television from the 70s and 80s, that it's actually up-to-date creation research. So thank you, Sam, and make sure they know how to get the kids' books on Adam and the dinosaurs and things like that. Diane, what do you reckon?
I like it. I think it's really good because it does pick out some of the important biblical topics that we promote. We're here not just to talk about how clever the creation is and what interesting things we see out in the real world. We are here to tell people about the real history of the real world, and we've got some of that in the logo. We've got human beings, we've got a tree. Trees are really important in the Bible, and we've got a dinosaur because everyone loves dinosaurs, but there are lots of important things we can tell people in using the theme of dinosaurs to tell them about our Creator, our Judge, and our Savior.
Amen. Amen indeed. So yeah, also as well, we have something in the background as well. It's not quite live yet, but we will announce it now. We are launching a new merchandise store for everyone who wants to purchase some t-shirts with a new logo on, hoodies with a new logo on, Creation Conversations logos on there. You can buy a mug with the new logo on if you want, or you can buy some buttons. We earn money from that, and that directly supports the ministry. So you are helping us a great deal with that if you do. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put the link in the chat. It isn't live yet, so that should hopefully go live at some point this week. We'll be making an announcement on Twitter when that does go out live, and probably Facebook as well. So hopefully, all things going well, it's all going to be hunky dory. But by this time next week, we'll have the merchandise all be live, ready to go, and you'll be able to help support us and wear us out and about, as it were. Right. Okay. I think it's about time to kick off our main topics for today. So we've got a bit of a scripture for you. This comes from Exodus chapter 20. It's verse 11. It reads, "For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, sea and all that is in them, and rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy." So that's a lovely callback to Genesis. But John, do you want to tell us why we're mentioning that today?
Sure. 3 reasons particularly come to mind. One is a dear Christian man in the older generation, not quite as mature as myself, for example, but his attitude was, well, yes, God created everything in 6 days, but surely the earth was here for a long time before that. Now, this has been a common view ever since the geologists started to make the world older and older and older. So if you go back to the founding fathers of geology with Steno and some of these, they had no trouble with a 6-day creation in which God created, well, the old phrase is ex nihilo, because the Latin theologians could think of no better way of describing nothing being there. In fact, not even nothing. There wasn't a space. God made the space, and he made the heavens and he made the earth. In the evening, the morning was the first day, Genesis chapter 1 tells us. So there's no earth there before it. There's no time. There's not even darkness. And a good moral point from that is, if God created the darkness, it's his property. Don't get scared by the devil because he's trespassing, right? So there's all sorts of interesting little things that depend on this whole biblical concept being true. So there's the first one, a gentleman who firmly believed the Bible to be true, but he sort of thought Genesis had to be millions of years after the world was created, even if there was no people or anything on it. And of course, there's a second reason, and that is that we get people asking us, well, if the world was there forever, what was in between Genesis being created and then man coming? And you get people pushing again the gap theory. Now, we'll allocate a whole program to that one day, but that's just come up in the past couple of weeks as well. And then there's a more personal, sad one, because one professor in the USA, very much involved in creation work, he and I have been chatting this week, and he said, listen, that young man that we were so hopeful for, he's been to university and he's been led astray. He no longer believes Genesis is literally true, no longer believes the 6 days necessarily mean 6 days. They could be symbolic. And he said it's one of the Christian, quote unquote, professors at the university who's actually led him astray. And he was actually asking about a particular book. And we're going to bring this up a little bit later. Diane, we asked her to do some reviews in it. It'll be up on it. It is actually up on our question answer website. But those are the 3 motivations. So I thought, first of all, one of the things I'm going to do, I'm going to bring it from the slide shortly, is deal with why do people want the earth to be old anyway? The answer is usually for the same reasons I did. My professor said so. He approved my degrees. If I didn't agree with him, I was out. That was my motivation, right? So I didn't sort this issue out till after I'd left university. It was so strong and so influential. Now you've got the television just pushing millions of years every time David Attenborough or the BBC or National Geographic. I even looked at a program on one of the South American deserts, and it was all about how for millions of years Now, it's just brainwashing all the time. And you get it even in kindergarten with the kids. Millions of years ago, the dinosaurs. Okay, so they don't want our new logo. Of course, you've got Adam and the dinosaurs side by side. Well, make sure you get your cup of coffee with our logo on. I mean, it'll look even better than my blank cup of coffee. You can have your own personalized logo. By the way, this is the first time I knew about this today, so I'm going to order mine and make sure it comes to me so I can boast about it on the show next week. So the first thing I'm going to do is bring up some slides, Sam. And if you bring up my first one that deals with this issue of why do people think the Earth is so old? Now, you'll notice there's a bit of revision here because this issue keeps coming up. There's some students looking at the Grand Canyon. They see millions of years. Just ask them. But the interesting thing is, why do they see millions of years? And the reason is very simple. How could the Bible be true if the rocks are so old? That's a common question from students. Why do they think the rocks are so old? Because their attitude is the bottom rock got there first. The top rocks are younger. And so in geology, from kindergarten onwards, we had this thought. The bottom layers got there first. Now, neither you nor I nor Nicholas Steiner, who came up with this idea, actually went and checked to see if it was real. The bottom creatures in those rocks must have lived and therefore died first. And your next bit of logic, when you have a look, you add their lifespans. How long did it take the fish to get as big as the fish fossil? How long did it take to actually have a shell with 100 layers in it? And away you go. You add up the lifespans, and this is even before radioactivity. They would have said these rocks took hundreds of thousands to millions of years, and the world started to get older and older. And then Darwin comes in and points out, hey, the creatures in the top are different than the ones in the bottom. Lyell goes with him. Lyell and Darwin work together, and Darwin's theory is the top creatures must have evolved from the bottom ones. Have you noticed? We've gone from a biblical worldview to a non-biblical evolutionist worldview, all because you've accepted the geologic column. Today, that's what you see in the textbook. Millions of years of evolution. In fact, therefore, the conclusion that most people, including myself and my atheist father, would have mentioned, the Bible must be false, or at the very best, symbolic. Or you've got to come up with a new way of actually interpreting Genesis that fits in. Now, don't be surprised that the Bible, as we've stressed over and over again, has a lot to say about science. Now, that's straight out of King James. Beware of false science. And don't be surprised the word science is used there. The more modern translations would use the word knowledge. And then people would say, you can't refer to science here. Well, the old word for knowledge is science. And I'm old enough to remember when we looked at philosophy at Queensland University, you came across phrases like theology is the queen of the sciences. If you want to know about everything, then start with the God, the theos, who gives us the logos, the word. Watch out for false science that doesn't do that. And no, Paul wasn't writing to a professor, he was writing to young Timothy, and he expected him to know enough about knowledge to tell the difference between good knowledge and bad knowledge, or good science and bad science, even in the world dominated by Greek thinking. Now, there's a thought that young Joseph, who's enjoying his time away this weekend, he's said over and over again, this should be in every science course. Test all things. Hold fast to that which is good. But it does raise a good question. How would you know when something was good? I mean, come on, when you were 6, you didn't do advanced algebra because you didn't have enough idea of knowledge to decide whether that was good, useful, or anything else. You need to have a starting point. How do you decide if something is right? If you leave God out of your knowledge, then don't be surprised if you end up concluding that gay and lesbians should not be banned from school or churches or anything. What's your reference point here? Test all things. Hold fast to that which is good. Which brings me back to the thing that got me started. I remember in my geology course at Queensland University, our dear old professor walked in one day and he said, students, I'm sorry, the rocks in the Grand Canyon get old sideways. Now, that was a bit of a radical thought to me. And the trouble was, he never said another word about it for the next 4 years. When I left, he still hadn't meant. Why did he think that? Well, see the Grand Canyon? I've been there many times, climbed up and down there about 10 times. I know the rocks pretty well. You see the comment I've made? The professor said the rocks layers got there sideways. The ones at the top are older than the ones at the bottom. Now, having been there, I've got to agree with him, even if you only use the fossils. But of course, that throws everything we base evolution and old Earth and the whole gap theory and everything, it turns it upside down. Okay, question. Have you ever started off at the beginning? Because sediments only get there with water, and water erodes. But only moving water carries mud and sand. And then it only moves sideways. Isn't that so simple? You should have done that in primary school, in elementary school, in high school. You should have been reminded of it in first year geology. Water moves sideways. Therefore, the only way rocks can grow, they must grow in the direction of the current. The bottom layer, therefore, does not get there first. This is so simple, it's regarded as stupidly wrong. But in reality, I've sat in big rivers, I've sat in bays, I've sat there during flood time and watched the water do exactly that. The left side is older than the right side if that's where the current is coming from. Therefore, the top layer, can it be the youngest? The answer is no. The left side will be older than the right side. Which brings us back to Jurassic Ark. Now, when Joseph was a single man, we brought him to Australia because we can't bring just about anybody to Australia now because of COVID. But here he is in one of our models, one of our early models of our strata machine. I think it's model number 6. There's Diane, and we're measuring the water flow and noticing a few things. We had a big open day. We had 400 people there, sort of overcrowded everything. You'll see our primitive bath source of water. You'll see our rocket scientist Clem acting as the pump inducer there. Okay, so now we have kids who are always fascinated by water. And yes, we have mentioned this a few times, but you need to get this principle. There's the river flowing from left to right. Now, initially, this looks like it will only apply to rivers and only apply to bay mouths. But you watch what happens. Okay, here we are. The layers have formed from left to right. When you look, the time taken for those multiple layers to form is 2 minutes. And they're actually forming sideways. We sat there, we watched them. And then when we filled up the whole tray, we did something. Or we cut it so you can see inside. You see the layers on the outside alongside the perspex continue along on the inside. And then we actually had an erosional event. Now, do you see something? Does that look like something you've seen before? How about what these students are forming? I mean, sitting there? Sure it does. And my professor said the layers in the Grand Canyon get old sideways. But yet I've been there, I've sat through the guided tours, I've gone and done our own research, I've walked up and down, got some really good exercise, got great for the heart, and it's on the signs, it's from the tour guides, it's in the museum. The bottom layers are older than the top. But you see, my prof turns out to be right in every situation. I mean, is this just a giant flume tank? Well, I think it is. The professor obviously thought it was, but didn't want to comment because it makes everything go head up. It tips them topsy-turvy. It's not vertical time, but horizontal process. Now, if you want to see some more of this research, then go to creationresearch.net, click Exciting Research, and then search the rock layers. We've just posted up the program we did a few weeks ago as almost like a PDF, and you'll see the pictures there for your own. You can examine them for any length of time you like. And what's this based on? Yes, not just my professor, but it's based on a presentation I gave to the Oxford Geological Association. That's not the Oxford in Mississippi, right? This is the real Oxford, you know, the old one in England. I did a debate against the geology professor from Oxford, and I'm pleased to say he didn't win. I did a presentation to the Cambridge Union on this. I gave papers to the Sydney Basin Coal Conference, wrote some of it up for the International Coal Conference, and you've seen the Jurassic Ark experiments that we're doing now. Now, Sam, if you will just bring me back on screen here, and so Diane can actually talk about this. Now, Diane, you've been there, correct? You can give us the whole
Yes,
screen.
I've seen the strata experiments in action. Yes.
Now, just to qualify for new folks who are out there, what's your background? I mean, are you just someone we picked up off the street? Do you have any academic background? I mean, are you just a cute face from Canberra with a very, I mean, show your cup. It's a very pretty cup of coffee you had this morning. Where is it? No, we're not going to give you pretty marks like that. You'll get one without our logo on, and follow Sam's posting so you know where to do it and support
yes,
what we
no,
do.
I shall definitely be taking up the logo and using it on mugs and other things like that. Yes, because it's a great conversation piece. It's a great thing to talk about. Gives you a wonderful opportunity to talk about the truth of the Bible and to talk about the truth of Jesus. But anyway, going back to our rocks and fossils and our strata machine, my background's actually more in the biological sciences, and I'll be talking about some living things later on. I was a lecturer in biomedical sciences at a university in Canberra here for a while before I went full-time with creation research. Well, I did still give a few lectures there on a casual basis after I left there full-time. So yes, I'm more into living things than dead things, but at the same time, I'm interested in the real world. So I'm interested in the rocks and the fossils, and I've had a fascinating time watching the strata machine and seeing rock layers form in front of my eyes.
Now, the reason I asked that, Diane, is that we have people say, but you creationists are biased, are prejudiced. Now, in my experience, the sort of work you did, I mean, when I first met you, I think you were in a hospital in Sydney or a hospital university, can't quite remember all the details, but I remember doing ordinary geology and radioactive dating, right? And the thing that amazed me in geology is we were allowed plus or minus 30% in some of our results. And then I decided, well, I'm going to take organic chemistry and do 3 years of that and find out how living things work, right? And I was amazed whenever we did organic experiments or organic investigations, the professor would allow us plus or minus 1%. And I said to him, hey, listen, in geology, I'm allowed plus or minus 30%. How come you are so tight? And he said, well, in this field, plus or minus 1% can kill you. Right. So in your background, you have to do very precise observation. So you are qualified as an observer. That's the first point I want to make. Now, you are convinced that you actually saw this with your own eyes?
I did many times, yes.
Okay. And what's the reaction of the people to this?
Well, when we had our big open day there, you could see people sort of gasping at it, and that they were just amazed because they'd never seen anything like it. And particularly after we made all of those rock layers with the slanting layers, and then when we split it up there and you could see the layers that really did look like the pictures that they may have seen of the Grand Canyon or of various other rock strata that they may have seen here in Australia as well. It was a real eye-opener, literally. People's eyes were just like that.
Yeah. And yet we live in a world in which even most of the creationists and most of the Bible believers still have in their heads the bottom layer is the old one, the fossils in it must be older than the ones at the top, and it all forms slowly. So therefore, there must be a gap between verse 1 and verse 2, or if there isn't, we must have a new way of reading Genesis to try and fit this in, or else the earth was there for millions of years before the Genesis story started. So I'm going to move on to part 2 of this presentation here, and then we're going to hear from you in a very special area of this. So Sam, put me back up again.
Certainly can. There you go.
There's young Joseph, and there's older me. You can see he's in homeland, and I'm freezing to death, having just arrived on a big jet plane across to England. And here's where we were, right down near the Bristol Channel. I love the GPS on your phone because you can actually prove exactly where you were, right? Not far from the place called how do you pronounce that? Chepstow, something like that. There's Newport on the other side. Okay, now when you have a look, I was at this site because for many years, 40 years ago, I visited this site to collect dinosaur fossils. Yes, and there's all sorts of other fossils there. Oh, what are we collecting on that day? Can you actually see the scallop shell? There is no doubt about it. Scallops are still the same today, even though these rocks are supposed to be in the hundreds of millions of years of age. We've taken field trips there over the years. Only at low tide, by the way. This is one of those bore type areas where the tide comes in and comes high. But what's interesting is they have signs up there that tell you about this field trip area. I mean, look at the pictures of the layers there, and they give you names for the layers. The red ones are different from the green ones, and then they have a story about this, how over time it became a drowned desert. The red stuff at the bottom is a desert that was buried by the watery stuff that came in at the top. Now, I don't know about you, but I live in a country where there's lots of deserts, and they're usually very dry. If we call it drowning the desert, then we talk about floods. But floods is not an in word still in most people's mind, because the reason Charles Lyell got underway was his aim was, and we've said it before, so go and look at our quotes, to remove Moses from science. Moses, creation, Moses, 6 days, Exodus 20 verse 11, God telling Moses what he did, and Moses, Noah's flood record in Genesis chapter 6 through 10. Okay, now all of this is generic, and you can say, well, John Mackay, you're just a good storyteller. And there's no doubt about that is true. That's why kids love our storybooks on Noah. I love telling stories, always have. But what about the stories for the big kids? When I first went to this area many, many years ago, I picked up from the Geological Association the guides to the area. You'll see the Bristol Channel there on the left. The unmarked area. You'll see the red line, which is the cross section we're going to look at, because in the textbook, it's actually allocated there, right? All right, now you see the big pink one that shows up at the spot. Then you've got all these other layers. The bricky ones are limestone. The sort of dotted ones are sandstone. And then you've got a section at the top. And the evolutionist explanation is this took millions of years. So there was my challenge. Okay, here is a section that my professor, based on what he said at the Grand Canyon, would have said, this has been formed sideways. But I have a sideways machine. We invented it. And by the time we get to testing this one, we're up to Mark 10 strata machine. Yes, research is expensive. We're now up to Mark 11 or 12 because a big storm smashed that one to pieces. So outdoor research can be quite expensive. So for those of you watching and enjoying, if you want to help us with the cost of this, there's the way to do it. So click on to Sam's donation section there on this program and donate not only a cup of coffees, but the £10 or $20 to go with it. Okay, so here we are, 2019, with the Mark 10 strata machine. After you can see the sediment coming in with the flowing water at the right-hand side. You can see a layer there. Let's go closer up. All right. Now, what's happening here? You can actually see the water flowing uphill on the right. You can see it flowing with level at the top, and you can see it bouncing along with curves and also, actually, if you have a close-up look at that, can you see all the strata that's formed? Now, this is one current always flowing in the same direction. Look at this. One of the things we've observed, look at the right-hand side, just at the top. The layers there are not forming horizontally. They're actually forming parallel to the surface of the current. You know, I'm rewriting Steno's rules, that the law that says the layers form on the bottom first and they always form originally horizontally. I've decided that is nonsense. The layers in any deposit will form parallel to the surface of the current. I mean, look at the ones at the bottom. You see these nice curved ones? None of this sediment has been moved by uplift. This sediment has always been forming from right to left. And when it's been going topsy-turvy, it's formed current layers that are topsy-turvy. Nothing got moved around by any tectonic plate movement. Okay. Now, all that there, the sediment was coming in one. Oh, look, you can even see the top much clearer here. On the right-hand side, you will see the sediment is always forming parallel to that top of that wave. Quite amazing. In other words, you can say the anticlines and the synclines, these are the ones that go with geology or with the gravity or against it, uphill or downhill. None of them are due to subsidence or uplift. Now, the only thing we've done is actually vary the speed of the current, because that's what happens every day in a tide. And I sat in Washington State and watched a flood. Yep, I sat there for 3 days. I did go home for a bit of sleep, by the way, but I photographed the water coming down. There's no doubt about it. The flood would be vicious, and then it would slow down a bit. Then you'd have massive rain again, and you get bigger water coming in. So the speed of the current varied. Can you see what's happening? We are getting incredible deposits. And all of that, what looks like anticlines and synclines below it, is now got an opposite thing sitting on the top. And the water is still going in exactly the same direction. All that's changed is the speed of the current. Now, we are not taking millions of years to do this. We are not taking hundreds of years. It's undeniable. The beds are forming parallel. I mean, look at that. Flat at the top on the right-hand side. Then as it goes over the hill in the current, it's the current which is determining where the bed is, not the bed determining where the current is. All right, now let's go. There's the bottom. That's the map, the cross-section out of the map guide from the Geological Association. What you've got at top is our section in the strata machine. The bottom one, according to the experts, took millions of years. Are you ready? Are you up to coping with the next bit? Have you taken your blood pressure pills on your heart tablets? Because the top section took 20 minutes. And all that happened, we didn't change the content of the sediment. We actually changed the speed just 2 or 3 times, because that's what we see in the real world. In bores like the Bristol Channel, when the tide comes in or out, in storms, even in tides, with wave surges, in tsunamis. Again, can I stress one thing? There's the principle we've been using in geology at Jurassic Ark. Teach the students, taking the schools. The issue involved here is not time, but process. And if you get the wrong process, like the sediments at the bottom got there first, shake up a cup, watch the sediment students settle down, that is not the right process. No wonder you think it took millions of years. You see, the problem with most geologists, and the problem including many Christians, is they got the scale of Noah's flood and the wrong process. They picked the wrong process. Can I encourage you out there, if you want to see more of this, then support the work. Yes, 10 years of this has cost us a fair bit of money and a fair bit of time. And Joseph is so excited by it too, as we are. And we're no problem sharing this with you. So go to our website and click on experiment number 10 and 11. And this experiment you've just seen will be number 12. We're just getting it ready for posting up now. And you can share it with your friends. They need to see. Okay, Sam, bring me back up again.
There you go.
Okay, now there's another reason that I picked on this subject as part of the 6 days, and that is the reason that one of the guys in the USA said about the student who's been led astray from a simple faith in Genesis, and it's due to this book, Creation Unfolding, a new perspective on ex nihilo. Now, somebody in my own church actually read this before I did and said, can you actually have a new perspective on ex nihilo? And I'll be honest, after having a Bible on the planet that had Genesis in it, I mean, Adam, the only thing he would have had in his Bible if he had a copy would have been Genesis chapter 1, verses 1 to 31. That's about all he would have had. And then Noah, he may have had 10 chapters. By the time you get to Daniel, he had a few more. By the time you get to Paul, we're getting towards the one that you've got today. But can there be a new perspective on a book that's been attacked by skeptics for thousands of years, that's been researched by believers for the same thousands of years? I mean, just enroll in a theology course and try and find a new topic for a PhD on theology. I'm sorry, there isn't one. They've all been done after thousands of years. There's no new topic, just maybe a new subset of the same things that have been done. So I had to tell him, I'm sorry. What did the Book of Solomon say? There is nothing new under the sun, and it hasn't changed from then till now. Now, Diane, earlier actually, I think it was last year now, because I forgot the year's changed. Everything's been so mixed up in my head with my poor wife being sick and rushed off to hospital and everything. But last year, we actually spent a fair bit of time giving some criticism, positive and negative, of this book. And you want to talk about day 3 and plants and all of those things, because you love plants and you're pretty good at them. So take it away, Diane.
Yes, well, one of the issues that's constantly raised by people who don't want to accept just the plain meaning of Genesis of 6 days, meaning 6 days, they come up with all sorts of ideas. Well, maybe the days were long periods of time. Maybe they're symbolic of evolution. That's a question we've also dealt with. But let's look at that whole issue of, can we stretch a whole lot of time or into that those 6 days? So let's just look at one example. We could go on and on about this for a long time. So let's just look at one example and see how that just doesn't fit. So let's look at, when did God create plants? Well, if you go to Genesis and Genesis 1 and start at verse 11, where we're told, and God said, let the earth sprout vegetation, plants yielding seed, fruit trees bearing fruit, in which is their seed, each according to its kind on the earth. And it was so. The earth brought forth vegetation, plants yielding seed according to their own kinds, trees bearing fruit, which is in which is their seed, each according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And when did that happen? Well, it was on the 3rd day, as it clearly says there. So let me go to my slides here so that I can go to the next one. And sorry, I seem to have lost the... You
lost the PowerPoint?
Yes. On my screen anyway.
You press the Windows key.
Yep, here we go. Yes.
Yeah. There we go. Are we there?
Are we there? No, not on my screen anyway.
We still have the same one on our screen, Diane.
You still have the same one.
Yeah,
all
when
right.
did God create plants?
Plants, yes. No, I just need to advance the slides.
Are you clicked onto PowerPoint, Diane?
Hang on. Just a minute. I'm on PowerPoint, but I don't have the full screen.
Do you try sharing your screen again if you wish?
All right, let me try that.
So if you stop sharing.
Mm-hmm. Let me try this. Did that work?
Nope, same PowerPoint.
Same one. All right.
Okay, what I'm going to do, Diane, is I'm going to stop this share screen. I'm going to remove the source. So what you'll need to do is you'll need to get your PowerPoint up. We'll just
All right. Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. Now, do you have it now?
Have you clicked share screen?
Just
So you need to go back on. You need to go onto the restream window.
All right. Here we go. Yes. All right. Sorry about this, folks, but this is the hazards of technology. Right. There we go. Now.
Right. There we go.
Okay. Did that? Yes, it did. All right. Let's go back to the third day of creation. So when did God make the plants? On the third day of creation. Now notice these are the first living things that are described in Genesis in the series of creation. Now here's an interesting question. Can plants live on their own? Because there aren't any other living things there. But if we look about the world these days, we see living things all working together. We don't see anything working in isolation. And that's an important principle to keep in mind. Nothing in the living world works in isolation. So let's just look at one example of that. Genesis described plants that have seeds with fruit. Now, most of the seed-bearing plants are flowering plants, and they need pollinators. Some of them can pollinate themselves, but most of them need other pollinators. Now, how long can we wait until you get their pollinators? How long can these plants wait? Well, in fact, it's less than one generation, because after that, they're going to die off. So when you look at these sorts of plants, these are just annual plants that grow out in the fields and in the gardens. One generation is not actually all that long. They are supposed to live and die and reproduce very quickly. So they can't last on their own for very long. Now, most of these are pollinated by insects, but what about other more long-lived plants like these? Now, people think we have very weird plants down in Australia. Well, we don't think they're weird. We live with them all the time. Here are some lovely grevilleas from Jurassic Ark, and they're pollinated by birds. And very pretty birds as well. So how long are they going to last? Well, again, less than one generation. And look how well they are designed to be pollinated by birds. These are kangaroo paws. We also have these at Jurassic Ark. They grow better over in Western Australia. But look how well the flower, and you can see that in the middle with those what looks like 4 prongs sticking out. That's actually the flower. And look at the bird's beak, how well designed they are to be pollinated by this little bird. And other plants are actually pollinated by little small mammals. This is a photo taken by one of our colleagues named John Bean, who is a really brilliant wildlife photographer, and he took this photo of these little possum. And some of those weird-looking flowers, which are rather large, they're pollinated by small mammals as well as by birds. So they're well designed for that. Now, what else do plants need? Well, John, when you take your dogs out for a walk through the bush and the open fields, do they often come back with seeds and things like that stuck to their fur?
They do, and then they expect me to pull them off.
Yes, that's right. Okay, because plants are well designed to do that. Plants need seed dispersers, and they're well designed for that. So as well as pollinators, once they have made some seeds after they've been pollinated, they need seed dispersers. And so animals are more important as seed dispersers than as pollinators, or more commonly as seed dispersers. Now, do you recognize these?
Well, those Scotch thistles certainly grow well in Australia.
Well, these aren't actually Scotch thistles. Sam, do you recognize these? These grow in England. You might recognize these.
They do look very familiar, but I don't know the name of them.
Yes, yeah, they're burdock. All right.
That's it, burdock.
Burdock, yes. And they have these little hooks on them. and they are well designed for hooking themselves to animal fur so that the animals can disperse them. So plants and animals always work in cooperation. But on the third day, we didn't have any animals. Now, how long were the plants going to wait until they got their seed dispersers? They couldn't wait for too long. Otherwise, the next generation is not going to grow. So you can't put in millions of years. You can't even put thousands of years or even tens of years. Right? Now, what else do plants need? Well, here is a photo of just inside the entrance to our Jurassic Ark site, our Fossil and Garden site. And look at that beautiful growth. Isn't that lovely? It really is beautiful. And the rest of the garden is beautiful as well. But it didn't always look like that. Here's part of one of our After Their Kind garden. That's another whole issue that's mentioned in Genesis 1. We won't go into that now, but one day we might do a program on it. And in the background there, you can see one of our dinosaurs, but also a lovely, lush growth with trees and shrubs and low-growing plants. Doesn't that look nice? Well, it wasn't always like that. In fact, when we first moved there, there was no soil at all, really. And so we had to bring in literally tons of this mulch. And you can see what looks like just acres and acres of mulch with a few plants struggling their way up through that. And that's that same site as that first photo I showed you of just inside the gate. A lot has happened in those years. Now, it did involve a lot of hard work from the people at Jurassic Ark, a lot of watering and lots of this mulch laid down. But we also needed these guys. And in fact, we had to import them, right? Worms. And we really rejoiced when the worms started propagating and moving through all of that mulch, because plants need soil conditioners as well as all those other things. So in order for plants to grow, they need pollinators, they need seed dispersers, they need soil conditioners. They don't work on their own. And soil conditioners include all of these little creepy crawlies that you might have shuffling around in the leaf litter, as well as worms. So a lot of the invertebrates, all the things we think of as, oh, creepy crawlies, why would God make those? Really important things for keeping the living world working. Nothing in the living world works in isolation. So when God created the world, he made the plants on the third day. When did he make those other things? Well, the flying things like the birds were made on the fifth day. The animals, like the furry animals that pick up the seeds and carry them away, made on the sixth day. Now, if you make the world in 6 days, nothing in the living world works in isolation. Yes, you can wait a couple of days for your pollinators and seed dispersers and soil conditioners to come along, but you certainly cannot wait millions of years or even thousands of years. So what we see in the living world is evidence that there were rapid processes when things were first made, because everything had to work together right from the beginning. When God finished the world, it was a complete functioning ecosystem. So we can stand firm on this statement that Sam read out for us from Exodus. In 6 days, the Lord made the heavens, the earth, the sea, and all that is in them. And so let's go back to our discussion here and continue with John's. John has some more to tell us about the 6 days of creation. Can we go back to our discussion and carry on with? Do I need to turn off the screen sharing?
What's happened to you, Sam?
I'm going to handle that. That's fine.
All right. There we go. Yes.
You're just struggling a little bit, though.
All right. Now, I know we're appealing to people for Joseph because he had problems with his computer on the Isle of Wight. I'm not sure we can add you to this list, Sam, at the moment.
Yeah.
And by the way, for those of you out there with Joseph's car, remember it broke at the start of last year. We've been borrowing a car since then. We've had another donation of 5,000 Australian dollars. So the total in English pounds is now about 10,000 pounds. So thank you to those who've been donating towards that project. We'd encourage you to continue to do this as Joseph continues. Ministry's opening up in England because they've decided to declare COVID as just another flu. And we're looking forward to when they make that sensible decision out here as well. But at the moment, he's going to start needing vehicles fairly soon. So I'd encourage you continue to support him. Of course, if you want your own copy of Ken Colson's book, then you can get it from Amazon. That's how I got mine. But Diane, he's actually pushing a theory called supernatural formative processes. So he would say that he believed in the 6 days of creation, but when I read it, it reminded me of all of my studies at university dealing with organic chemistry and the theories of the origin of life on, say, the works of Mr. Needham, the priest who was a Catholic priest, who came up with the idea of, well, the seeds were still in the earth because God had put them there and they naturally turned into plants. So God didn't actually create plants. He used a natural process to actually bring the plants into existence. So don't be surprised that students who listen to this are actually thinking, well, a seed takes, well, come on, an orange tree. I grow oranges, I grow lemons. If I put a seed in the ground, it's going to be 5 years until it gets fruit. Trust me, I've waited with all of them to see what the crossbreed orange turns out to be. Time is part of supernatural formative processes, and his bottom line is based on even Charles Lyell, even though he sort of fights against it. Now, Diane, where will folks find the rest of basically your review and my review of Ken's book? They can see some on Amazon. Some are pretty negative. 1 or 2 are positive, but they can get their copy from Amazon if they like and read it for themselves. But where would they read our review of it?
It's on our what we call the Ask site. Okay, that's askjohnmackay.com. Because someone did actually write in a question and say, what do you think of this book? We're just confused by it. Can you tell us what you think of it? So we read through it and we did write our own review, and you can get that as an article off the Ask John Mackay site. So if you just put in Colson or creation unfolding in the search, or just look for topical articles, and it's there. It's fairly long. It's about 9 pages long. So we have made it into a PDF that you can download. You don't have to sit there and read on the screen and keep scrolling down for sort of a couple of 100 miles down the screen.
Okay, Diane, as well, we've produced a book with questions and answers. You got a copy you can hold up? Because this is available.
We get lots of questions about the 6 days of creation and about the beginning of the world, and we've actually put together a whole lot of those, which are questions from the Ask site. And this is the first one. We'll work on bringing some more about these out. So this is we're starting at the beginning. So this one has a section on the 6 days of creation. It's also got a section on Adam and Eve, and it deals with the issue, did God use evolution? In other words, are there any alternatives to just 6 days as it clearly states in Genesis? And we've dealt with those as well.
That's available in England, it's available in the USA, and it's available in Australia just through our web shops. So Sam can put all that sort of stuff up for you. And again, a reminder that what motivated this, I didn't even know the book existed, but we had the professors in the USA, particularly from a couple of creationist organizations, who said, can you help us? This guy's an Australian. And so that's one reason we've done this. And then the discussion the other day, it's really confused this student who no longer actually wants to talk about the literal 6 days and can you help us? So that's one reason for doing this. We don't normally tend to do book reviews, but this one really does need it. And I'll come back in a little while. We're going to throw it open now to questions. So Sam, do we have anything on the viewers who've posted in? Any comments? Any questions?
We certainly do. But on the screen now, as we mentioned earlier, is the you can donate through the Creation Research Store. You can donate through the Australian store, the UK store, and I believe the US store as well. And it is tax deductible as well in the UK. Let me just pull up some questions. I know we've had some from George Bond, our good friend. So let's have a look to see what his first question was. We had a donate from Francesca, who sent in £20. Thank you so much. God bless you. It's very generous of you. Right, here we go. Here's the first question. So, George asks, at current erosion rates, why are still chalk cliffs at the Isle, and why do we still have the White Cliffs of Dover? These in England should not exist.
Okay, well, I'll take that, and then Diane maybe want to comment. Having been totally undermined by the cliffs at the Isle of Wight, I know exactly some good examples, George. So what you'll find is we ran a field trip for a week on the Isle of Wight for homeschoolers in England. And in the morning, we would give them a teaching session, a Bible teaching session. We would give them a lecture on geology and creation, and then we'd go and collect dinosaurs. Now, not necessarily in that order because the tides change every day. So we had a very tidally based commentary. We actually filmed those lectures, and we have a video available, or streaming these days, on the geology of creation. And it deals with the 6 days and the history of this whole issue. And I'd encourage you, particularly homeschoolers, actually grab that or stream it. You will enjoy that. But what was interesting, we actually rented a place, a holiday place called Halfway House. Now, the reason it was called Halfway House is it was at least 100 meters to the road and at least 100 meters to the cliff when they first built it. But when we were there, I think we were the last people to actually legally rent that property, because you could walk around the back and there was the cliff. So that in the 100 years or so, the actual cliffs had retreated to the point of consuming the house. Now, if you sit down and think about it, okay, at that rate, there should be no Isle of Wight after millions and millions of years. Okay, so the question you raised about the chalk cliffs and their constant erosion is a really good one, George. It's been uplifted, and the rate of erosion is far faster than the rate of deposition on the other side. Did you catch what I said? Because when it erodes this side, there's no doubt the sediment goes somewhere and it deposits somewhere else, but not as cliffs. It deposits as big mud flats, right, that interfere with boats and transport and things like that. So what you find is, in most cases, the issue of erosion is ignored. The rates of erosion are ignored. You look at mountaintops, and the standard question is still a good one. The rate of erosion is, even if you make it 1 centimeter per century, if you have Mount Everest here for 10 million, 20 million, 100 million, 200 million, whatever time you want to put on it, it should be a flat plane, and it isn't. You can keep putting in recycling uplift, but it still doesn't work. So look up erosion, look up some good papers from the ICR and things like that on this subject. You will find it's very, very handy indeed. And whether it's the cliffs of Dover, yes, I've collected from the stuff that's fallen off the cliffs. Notice I didn't say I've collected from the cliffs. If you want a good rock fall on your head, that's the way to do it. So make sure you collect from the rocks that have fallen down, and not only is it legal, it's very safe. And we have found not only shark's teeth in that nice chalky stuff there, we found echinoderms, and we found plants with thorns on. Very interesting. So Diane, you've been to some of these places too in your trips to England. You've seen erosion in Australia. What's your general comment on this question?
Well, a few years ago, I did go on a walking holiday down on the Jurassic Coast. And as we were walking along this coastal path, which was just brilliant, I'm hoping to go back there again sometime, hopefully soon, if the government will let me in. And The leader of the tour was describing the various coastal landforms we had. And at one place, we had to actually divert away from the edge of the cliff. He said, we can't walk along the edge there because this has fallen down and they're going to have to remake the path here. It's fallen down within a matter of, I think it was 10 years or something like that. And he said, that's truly amazing. That's just a blip in geological time. But as we've seen with our strata experiments, as we can watch erosion happening, as we can watch deposition in floods and deltas these days, geological processes are not millions of years, they're very brief. We can actually sit there and watch them. So it's not a blip in geological time, it's just a normal geological process, and it's not taking a long time.
Right. Has anyone got any other questions there? I think not much more we can reach out of that, George, and great to hear from you again.
Yes.
Yeah, I think we've scourged all we can from the cliffs of that question. Right, a question from George Bond. I think he sent in like 3 or 4. So they recently, apparently, according to George Bond, he said that they recently found a perfectly preserved frog buried in 400-million-year-old limestone, and after it was cleaned and thawed, the frog came back to life. How is this possible after 400 million years?
Okay, 2 comments from my own experience. When I first went to England, this was a common thought in one of the suburbs of Manchester that I was staying in. They took me to the site, and when you actually checked it as thoroughly as you can, it was a widely believed story without any actual frog that you could actually find to point to. So there are these stories that do abound, but when you trace them down, most of them just disappear into nothingness. Secondly, I do have perfectly preserved frogs in sediment. I have a frog this big, right? That's magnificently preserved, but it's also dead, and it's beautifully fossilized, and it's wonderful evidence against evolution. Thirdly, you know how we've been telling you that we've had recent floods at Jurassic Ark after several years of drought? One of the things that we have out here is, I guess you could call them water frogs. The Aborigines used to dig them up and then squeeze them to drink the water out of them because they would bloat up. Somehow they knew a drought was coming. They'd fill up with water and they'd bloat up, and then they would seal themselves. They actually do make a sealed chamber and bury themselves quite deeply under the ground. And if you are at Jurassic Ark, where we removed several feet, 2/3 of a meter of soil in some places, you actually get down to the layer they were in, and lo and behold, out of this Jurassic rock pops a frog, right? And you would not be blamed if you said, oh, that was buried in Jurassic sandstone. Well, it was. It buried itself, right? And it often comes out dehydrated because it's been there for several years, and if you re-watered it, it pops to life again. So when it boils down to the bottom of these things, the actual story of it having been there for vast amounts of time, the 400 million years for a start, is evolutionist propaganda. But the majority of these, apart from the ones that have buried themselves, turn out to be non-justifiable. So be careful of spreading fake news. The media is really great at that, particularly about creation, so that the creationists will grab a hold of it, not check it, and end up looking rather, they've got egg on their face. So just be careful with these, George. They're very important that we don't mess up people's minds with fake news when there's plenty of good news about fossil frogs. Diane, any comment?
Yes, the frogs that bury themselves, they will bury themselves out in the desert as well. As you say, animals seem to have a real sense of what's coming in the environment that we're not so sensitive to, and so they will bury themselves. However, there is a limit to how long they can last. It's a matter of years. It's certainly not millions of years. But again, they're not dead. They're actually in a form of extreme hibernation, and there is a limit to how long it will go on. But they are the same frogs. They're not fossils. They're actually still alive.
I think the word is torpor, isn't it?
Torpor, yes. In reptiles and amphibians, the word torpor is used rather than hibernation.
Yes, I always get amazed at animal
Mm.
sensitivity. Like when we had that big tsunami in Indonesia, not one dead native animal was found as a result of that, because they'd all left several days before. And in earthquakes, the old Chinese saying, if you can't find cats or sparrows, disappear yourself. Because something's going to happen, an earthquake or whatever. And they are very, very sensitive. Perhaps they feel something through their feet. I don't know. Nobody does. But it's certainly, when you look at frogs like that, again, be cautious. Err on the side of provability. As the scripture says, test everything. Only keep the things that are true. Any more questions, Sam, before we move on to the next section?
Yes, we have another question from George Bond. Yeah. John, it was interesting to note that many of those layers under different water speed scenarios show bent layers that secular geology claimed to be formed under heat conditions with lateral movement. I found that fascinating. I thought that was really, really this is like cutting edge stuff in terms of research. So
we certainly found it fascinating too, because we didn't set out to do this. We just set out to turn the machine on and then see what happened if you change the speed, like we actually observed in the deltas or in the rivers, etc. And we just stood there with our jaws down saying, look at this. It looks just like the bottom of the Grand Canyon, or just like the top of Mount Everest, or whatever. It was spectacular. And George, 3 questions demands 2 coffee stickers through the donation system at least, mate. So I hope that benefits you. It certainly does look like long-term metamorphism of sediments that have twisted them up, and yet nothing like that happened at all. All that happened was the current slowed down, changed its angle, and the bedding followed the angle. That's been one of the biggest revelations to us. I've talked to water experts, I've talked to piping experts and sedimentary flow experts, and they just deal with straight flow through pipes. That's where most of the research is done. So they've known the water forms in layers for ages, but what we've done is not what they're used to, nor is it what you read in geology books about how sediment is laid down. Now, I'd encourage you, go to creationresearch.net, click on the exciting research, scroll down to experiment number 10. You will find that very, very helpful. And the one we showed you today, which will be experiment number 11, should be up there sometime in the next week. It would have been up there, except my wife got rushed to hospital Thursday. So please pray for her still. And of course, the good news is, when the nurse was reading me out all of those things about what could go wrong, I'll be honest, when I have to prepare a field trip for school, I have to give them all of those health and safety things. And it just sounded like she was giving me a government health and safety directive about all the things that could go wrong, including you could die. And I thought, well, my wife's a Christian. It really doesn't matter. So this program is not just about, the strata. It's about the fact that the devil uses false information about strata to get you sidetracked into millions of years, or the need of a new explanation, such as Ken Colson thinks he needs, on the naturalistic formative processes, when you don't need that at all. Okay, one more question, if you've got one from somebody else, Sam.
Well, just on your point about the fact that George Bond has sent so many questions in, there was a donation. He has actually sent in 20 Aussie buckaroos. So God bless you, mate. Thank you so much.
Thank you, George. We do appreciate that.
And I am Matt as well, has sent 4 US buckaroos. So thank you so much for that. Again, thank you so much for all the donations. It really does help the ministry succeed and to reach as many people as we do. Oh, he sent another $20. Look at that. George, you're being too generous. God bless you. Thank you. Anyway, right, that's all the questions I've got so far. If you have any questions, please feel free to stick them in the chat. Make sure you preface it with the letter Q. That means I can see it. And then hopefully after this next bit, we'll be able to get to your questions. Right, John.
Okay, Sam, if you'll just put me on whole screen and I'll talk a moment, then I'll bring my PowerPoints up. So again, to remind you the things we've been doing at Jurassic Ark, I'd encourage you. It's available in England, available in the USA, available in Australia, tights, mites and fossil fights. You'll find all the research we've been doing at Jurassic Ark in there, up to when Joseph came a couple of years ago and a little bit further beyond. Great pictures. I mean, I love pictures. There's no doubt about it. Pictures mean 1,000 words. So all that we've done is in beautiful pictures for you to evaluate yourself. But of course, our motivation today was the questions we've had about how do you read Genesis? Is it sort of literal? Is it symbolic? Do you need this thing called supernatural formative processes, which with the emphasis on natural more than super? About the professor who said a student has been really struggling because he doesn't know how far he can take Genesis. The creation groups in the USA who've contacted and said, he's an Aussie, help us. So that's one thing we are actually doing. Okay, I did mention before that when you look at the concept that seeds take a long time to actually form in the world today, and yet Colson and others would say God could use a natural process and build it in to the appearance of Genesis. I do need to remind you of a very famous, almost a supernatural formative processes guy. His name was Needham, John Needham. I remember studying him at university. We did him in organic chemistry and in biology. Yes, I have much more than geology in my background because I deliberately did that to find out how living things work, not just dead things like fossils. And John Needham, he was interesting because he's actually moderately famous in his day for being a Catholic priest. So he believed in God. He believed that God created. But he's also famous for starting to write papers on geology. He lives in the 1700s, right? And he wrote papers on pollen and plants, and they're actually pretty good. That's where he got famous for. But then he went one step further, and he used this supernatural formative process type theory where the seeds were in the earth and they could turn in. The seeds of life would have been in the earth, and they could actually turn into things. God put all the embryonic information in natural form, and then when God said, let the ground bring forth plants, it naturally brought forth plants. Well, you need to know that it was the creationists who intended the best, but they ended up bringing forth the theory that you know as spontaneous generation. So don't blame the pagans for that. Blame the misinformed, uneducated, non-biblical creationists. Yes, he would have said, I believe in creation. And in those days, the Catholics still stood on 6 days of creation. But as to what it meant, that's where they started to diverge from it. And of course, what he ended up doing, all of the experiments, you know, the guy who gave us pasteurization and that was all about proving this natural formative process was and is absolutely wrong. So let's go and do one more thing as we look at the next section, which deals with Genesis. I'll bring my PowerPoints back up. Sam, if you can do that, that would be great. A reminder of that Bible verse we're discussing. In 6 days, God made the heavens and the earth and the seas and everything that's in them. Now, it's no use saying God created a space, and in the space he put formative issues that would turn into an earth, even if it did so in 24 hours. That's not how the Bible describes. It says, and God said, let the earth, and God said, let the light, and God said. When people say Genesis doesn't mention a method that God used to create, in fact, Genesis is full of it. It says God spoke and it was. Same as Jesus spoke and water turned into wine. Now, if you read Colson's books, you will see him trying to apply the methodology of formative processes even to Jesus' miracles. That built into the man's body was the tissues that could regenerate his eyes or ears or make water turn into wine. Well, there is nothing in water that will make it ever turn to wine. The recipe is you have a God who created water, you have a God who created wine, one word from him, and water does as it's told. Why did he take 6 days? Well, let's look at some of the fun that you can have with this. This is my most famous cartoon series I did when I was the editor of the Creation magazine. 6 days, yes. It's been adapted and used all around the planet. My artist, Steve Cardner, who was my artist even then, he's really good at turning these ideas. You're sure it says 6 days? Yes. Now, do you remember what's next? Because it's quite hilarious. 6 truly, really days? I mean, that's the issue. Do the days mean days? How do you read the days? Do you need formative processes in the days? Of course, the next serious question is this one. Wonder why God took so long. Now, have you ever tried to answer that question? Because the interesting reason is God took 6 days to make the heavens and the earth in the beginning, but when he remakes the heavens and the earth in the end, he's not going to use 6 days. He doesn't need to anymore. Surprise, surprise, and we need to do a whole separate study on it. The reason he took 6 days is so that you would know who Jesus was when he came and be a savior, because he rested on the 7th day and rose from the dead on the 1st day of the week when the light shone in the darkness. Oh, but that's a teaser. We can come back to that one. I still have told you many times that I love sitting through some of the linguistic lections from our Hebrew specialists out here when we first set up this ministry, and how they know when something in Hebrew or English or anything else is meant to be taken literally. Here's a historical literal statement in English. In 1492, Columbus sailed to America. You know, you're given a rhyme to remember that. 1492, Columbus sailed the oceans blue. Well, having read some of his travel, I'm sure it wasn't blue at all on many parts of that time, but that's the poetry. The literal statement is actually true. But can you prove this in language? The answer is yes. In 1492, Columbus, that's the subject of the issue. He sailed. That's the doing word, the verb. Where was he going? The object was to America. That's what it would eventually be called. Now, subject, verb, and object. When you look at English, we know that something is meant to be heard literally if I use that structure. Language is coded. It's always got a clue. Hey, did he really mean to take that literally? I mean, when I say the boy stood on the burning deck, his pants they caught on fire, you're not really imagining a boy whose pants are on fire. You're having fun with words. Question: how do you know if Genesis is literal? Now, there is Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. Of course, if you're reading from left to right, you're in trouble already, because Genesis reads from right to left. But when we translate it into English or transliterated it, Bereshith bara Elohim hasamayim hares, that's the transliteration with the Hebrew sounds. Okay, now if you want to turn it into a structure that you can understand, bara is the verb. That's the one in the beginning God created. Bereshith bara. Now that's what it says. At the start, in the beginning, God did something. But do you notice Elohim, the word for God? No, that's not a name, that's a position. Elohim, what you know from it, of course, is I am means plural. This God, whoever it is, this one at the top, because that's all that Elohim means. It's like the word king. This God at the top is a plural. So you have the verb, what he did. In the beginning, created he, God. You also know it's a male. And that's amazing what was hidden in those languages. And then the rest of it, in the beginning, God created the heavens, hasamayim, and the earth. The W upside down EET is the word for and the haaretz is the earth there. Okay, notice subject, verb, object again, because in Hebrew, which is a little different from English, they actually have verb, subject, object. So in English, we use subject, verb, object to tell you the clues. Listen to me, I'm telling you something that's literal. So if you're in a court of law, you'd better answer with subject, verb, object. Of course, if you're in a Hebrew court, you'd better answer with verb, subject, object. How is this translated from Hebrew into English? There, in the beginning, God, subject, created, verb, the heavens and the earth. Because the linguists have said this is literal in Hebrew, it needs to be literal in English. So you can't just directly translate it with the same word order, because you English people wouldn't actually know how to take it. Okay, there's another couple of things that I've learned over the years by listening to many linguists, by reading books on language, by actually asking questions. And it's a very simple principle. The first time a word is used, the author, if the word is invented, has the right to define it the way they want. Did you catch what I said? If you invent a new word like transliteration, Now, I didn't invent that word, but somebody put two Latin words together and gave it a meaning. I've turned it into something else. I've taken it across the road, transport, and I've literally turned it into something else. First usage principle. Here's an example. This is the very one that Dr. Alan Hall, who lectured in linguistics at Queensland University, who translated the Bible into 5 languages. He was a brilliant linguist. He used it to tell me what it meant. Radar. Back in World War II, it was a literal box. I mean, it was a mystery. I love reading World War II novels, and the first pilots who were given this were really mystified because they had a box. It just didn't do anything. It just sat there. And they didn't know what it was. It was a mystery box. A radar, no, it just stands for radio aerial detection. And the rest of it is just taken from the name. So somebody took the words and they took the letters and invented a word, radar. Now, radar at first was a literal black box. But then by the time you get past World War II and you get to the Korean War, you have somebody called radar. Now, he's called radar because he can hear the helicopters before even the radar machine picks it up. He's got really good ears. What he picked up is never explained on the program called MASH. I hate to say this, MASH had some funny bits in it, but it also introduced you to the transsexuals and all of that. Be careful of TV shows you let your kids watch too. Is radar becoming a symbol? It's moved from being literal because the man is not a radar set, and radar's not actually his name. But then you go one step further. So if you have the Baptist annual general meeting, the pastor and the deacons meet beforehand and say, we have to sneak something under the radar before the whole congregation gets here. Now, there's no radar in the room. There's no black box. There's nobody from the cast of MASH. There's nothing literal that's there. The word has moved from literal to a symbol to having a metaphor. And surprise, surprise, that's the fate of just about every word that we've invented. But there are some words where they get stuck in a rut. You can't move them from literal to symbolic. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was without form and void, and darkness covered the face of the deep. Now, do you realize there wasn't even darkness before God created it? The first time you use darkness, it has a literal meaning. Otherwise, you don't know what it means. The darkness is black. The darkness is the absence of light. You can go on and make all sorts of definitions you like, but unless you take it as literal, it's not anything. It doesn't have any natural formative process of coming from nothing. It had to be made. Darkness is God's property. If you're scared in the dark, tell the devil to get lost. He's trespassing on God's property. But the progress? Well, after sin comes in, men degenerate into spiritual darkness. Now, you and I know what we now mean. The light that comes from God on truth now is missing. So the atheist, pray for Richard Dawkins, pray for David Attenborough, because they're about to enter into eternal darkness when their life, did you catch what I used? Because the Bible describes hell as a place that's totally absent of light, darkness. Now, darkness has not really moved beyond that. It's literal in the first place, and it's got a semi-literal meaning is as far as you can actually take it. Now, darkness is a descriptive word. Light is a description word. What about words like day? Does it progress? Because if you want to use supernatural formative processes, you'd better get your theology straight. Because who invented the word day? And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night, and the evening and the morning were the first day. There you have the word day, and there's no doubt about it, the Bible is describing it as a name that was invented by none other than God for what he had done. Now, I'm not talking about the language you are using, because it doesn't matter whether it's Hebrew, it doesn't matter whether it's Australian. What you're finding is the word day in Genesis 1 is used as a literal noun. It's used as part of what in English is a subject, verb, object description. In Genesis chapter 2, it has a more limited meaning of time, as opposed to 24 hours, because it says in the day that God created the heavens and the earth. And we could have a whole discussion. You might want to raise this up in questions. In Genesis 1, it's described as having light and darkness. In Genesis 1, it's described as having first, second, third, fourth, etc. In Genesis 2, it just says in the day that God created the heavens and the earth. Well, it's referring to a specific time, so it's got a literal part of it, but it's not as literally defined as the day in Genesis chapter 1. And the furthest it goes is the last two, in the day of the judges. Now, we know that's a literal time because there were 13 judges. So you can go and find from when they were born to when they die. So this is a very specific literal time. And by the time you get to the day of the Lord that's coming as a day of judgment, I'll guarantee one thing: it's not even 24 hours. Now, a key point, in case you missed it, is this one. The first usage principle when it comes to day is not building in, oh, God built seeds into the earth and they could use naturally formative time to actually. So don't be surprised if there's evidence the world took millions of years, because the natural processes would show that. The Bible is not talking about God using natural processes at all. He's actually talking about him speaking and then things happening on the spot. Now, when it comes to the word day, the invention of the actual day, not the descriptive words we've invented after Babel. Now, Hebrew may go back before Babel. Some people might want to debate on that, but it doesn't matter. The words that we use now, yom in Hebrew, Latin, die. Australians still use Latin for saying good eye, mate, right? That's what we've been accused of. Or the UK day. What we're referring to here is the actual thing, which needs a literal noun to name it. Now, have you noticed one thing? If you invent a word and it's a noun, then it's literal. It cannot become a symbol until everybody understands the literal meaning. So the first time the word day is invented, it cannot be anything else in any language except a literal subject, a really important thing that you get. Okay, consistent usage principle. Can I encourage you to read through the Bible and follow some of the words? When does night change? When does day change? When does it become something that's symbolic? Because if it never becomes symbolic, don't you make it symbolic. Don't even use it to introduce ideas. Well, time could have been built into this. Adam needed a skin tan, so he had to have time built in of exposure to actually see this. And you'll see all of these critiques on our website under the heading of the fact file and Q&A concerning this book on supernatural formative processes, or a new explanation for ex nihilo, or creation unfolding. Okay, here's one point that I'm going to finish with, a couple of points that you really do need to know. When you have a look at consistent usage, I almost never get Isaiah chapter 30, verse 26 brought up in a discussion, whether it's with Seventh-day Adventists or whether it's with old earthers or whether it's those who want the day to be symbolic. Moreover, the light of the moon will be as the light of the sun. This is referring to end times, and the light of the sun will be sevenfold as the light of 7 days, in the day that the Lord binds up the bruises of his people and heals the stroke of their wounds. Look that verse up, study it left, right, inside out. Do you know what's happening here? Where is God getting the concept from that the light of the sun will be 7 times the light of 7 days? Come on, be honest. You and I would not say it that way, because we think the day is defined by the light, and the sunlight would have to be 7 times brighter than the light of the sun. But it doesn't say that. It says in the last days, when God's going to bind up the bruise of his people, then the light of the sun will be 7 times as bright as the light of 7 days. Why would he do that? Question. Where does our definition of day come from? The answer is before the invention of the sun. So Genesis chapter 1, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth was without form and void, and darkness covered the face of the deep. And God said, let there be light. Now this is 3 days before there's any sun. So the brightness is defined in terms of the light God created to make the day. Do you see where God's borrowing the idea from to tell tell Isaiah? Isaiah wasn't there, so he didn't think of this analogy. Isaiah may have had his own copy of Genesis, because when we dug up the Dead Sea Scrolls, there were 30 commentaries, I think, on Genesis alone. They regarded this as important. We have copies of every book in the Old Testament in those Dead Sea Scrolls, except for one. But Genesis is there in abundance. The light of the sun will be sevenfold. Do you realize what God is doing? He's sticking to his original definition. You and I wouldn't have done it that way, but the fact that God did tells you that he's wanting you to take Genesis chapter 1 literally. He didn't need to make seeds of light in the darkness. The sun didn't supernaturally form out of the naturalistic processes that God built into energy to make a sun. So again, as we've told Ken, we love Ken. We'd encourage you to buy his book and have a look at what it says yourself. But pray for the students who are struggling as a result of it. We told Ken to actually start all over again, because he's doing exactly what Mr. Reddy did. He's doing exactly what Mr. Needham did in the 1700s, and it never leads to something good unless you take the scriptures as wholesale. Okay, Sam, bring us back on, because it's now 10:02. Time to have our last minute of questions, and you can cut my screen. Thanks, mate.
There we go. All done and dusted. Right. Okay. So we've had one or two questions in. We've had a two-part question from BR Bass. Good to see you. He says, let's have a look. So this is the first part, and I'll bring up the second part. When God creates the new heaven and new earth, will he reuse this rock, aka Earth, or will he make a completely new planet? In other words, will God be recycling? And part two is the new heaven and new earth will not have a sun or moon. There will be no night. This implies it will be a new universe.
Okay, just a couple of thoughts. The first one is, whenever the scripture talks about end times, remember Paul spoke about seeing through a glass darkly. Now, one reason I love Genesis is it's already happened and it can't be changed. And we don't want to try and change it, right? It's so clearly laid out for us. When we get to the book of Revelation and we talk about a new heavens and a new earth, don't be surprised that many Christians struggle about this, because it says itself, by the time you get past chapter 3, 4, 5, and 6, it says this is a mystery, right? So if it's a mystery for the writer back who was one of Jesus' disciples, it certainly will be a mystery for us. There's no doubt about it. So be very humble when you talk about the new heavens and the new earth. Okay, first thought. There's a scripture in the Old Testament, the book of Psalms, which says he founded the earth forever. You got that? And then it also says God will melt all the elements in Peter in fervent heat. It doesn't talk about doing away with those elements. Melting them. Why? The traditional punishment, the traditional judgment, the traditional cleansing for sin is to kill things with fire, to burn all the dross up. So I have a suspicion that the picture that's being used there is I'm going to purify planet Earth. But since he's not going to be inconsistent, the earth was founded forever, and whatever he used there, it would seem that he's going to use it again. But it says we will have no need of a sun, because he will be our light. Now be careful, it doesn't necessarily say there won't be any sun, it just says we will have no need of it in the book of Revelation. And there will be no night, because you and I will be tucked into the holy city, or we'll be outside because we're allowed to go in and out, but he will be our light. And I'm honestly looking forward to that, where everything I see in the light of Jesus. So we won't be quibbling about how long this seed would have taken to turn into a plant and how long the worms actually had, vast ages, because Ken's theory is based on accepting the history of geology, based on his understanding of rocks, that has really started from a totally wrong perspective. So when you have a look, I suspect he's going to reuse everything because he invented it, and he's going to use it again. But yes, I think we will have a new heavens and a new earth, and it will be, what's it say? Therein will dwell righteousness, no trace of sin. All the sin will be burned out. Either way, I'm looking forward to being with Jesus. What about you, Diane?
Yes, I'm certainly looking forward to being with Jesus. But yes, there's no reason why God can't use the same atoms that He made to create the universe and particularly the earth as He's made in the first place. After all, when He made them, they were very good. They're still very good. We messed them up, but as He said, He's going to clear away all of the mess. It's like when you remake something out of the original components. You break it up. It no longer is that complicated object, but the components are still there, the actual substance, you remake it, it is something that's new because it's required the action of a creator to make it new. So it will be a new heavens and new earth because it will require the actions of a creator, but He can use the same atoms that He used to make the universe and the same energy. It will be just free of all of the contamination that our sin has put into it because Jesus Christ has done away with our sin.
One thought that you might find helpful from my own conversion, one of my songs that I learned early that was one of my favorites was I'm a new creation, I'm a brand new man. Right now, that is based on scripture where Paul says, all things will be made new. We are made new because in Jesus Christ, we are renewed from inside out. So that's how the term is also used in scripture, even though my body was the same and is failing, right? My body was not made new. I've got a promise about that. In the new heavens, the new earth, John Mackay will again be handsome. John Mackay will again be actually 100% honest and truthful and have no sin left whatsoever. My body at present is suffering the consequences of sin, even though I've been made new because Jesus shed His blood on the cross and He has worked in me through His grace to save me. He's done the same for Sam, done the same for Diane, but I've known them both for a few years and I can see some grey hairs there, Diane. Not with you yet, Sam, that's the cat that rubs up against you. But it really is a use of the new creation term in the New Testament, which may help you put it in perspective.
There we go. And Biabas said, what's the name of that song?
What's the name of what?
The name of the song you sang. I'm a brand new creation.
It's called I'm a New Creation.
Oh, there we go.
That's what it's called. Nice. I think it dates back to the 70s and 80s. That's 1970.
Yes, I remember that song. I am a new creation. Here in the grace of God I stand. Yeah. Yes. And it's a reference to one of Paul's letters. I think it's 2 Corinthians, where he says that when you are in Christ, you are a new creation.
Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, I think that's a little bit before my time. But anyway, we've got a little bit of a humour break here from George, as usual. Joke. John, if you ever get an email from me with meat in the subject line, don't open it. It's spam. There we go.
All right, because then I'd have to cook it and then it would be bacon.
Yeah. We've got a question here from Jim P. The Bible mentions this in Revelation 20, verse 7. And when the 1,000 years are expired, Satan shall be loosed out of his prison. What is your interpretation of this?
Well, again, remember that what chapter of the Bible it's in right towards the end. And you and I are seeing through a glass darkly. And the simplest way is, I mean, we might even run a whole program, an end times one. If we wanted to lose half of our supporters, it would be the way to do it, because there's so many people with so many diverse views out there that you really have to, it's even worse than creation sometimes, to be blunt with you. I love my friend who became an Anglican priest, right? And he said, what the whole book of Revelation is about is Jesus wins, the devil loses, 1-0. Great score, and that's really where things are going. Can I encourage you? I have friends who can tell me every day of that 1,000 years outline, and I spend years preaching on it and forget to get to Jesus as the victor who's conquered the devil, who's conquered sin. And to be honest, it's more important in your life right now that you know the power of Christ, the Creator, in you conquering sin. And if you have to endure the persecution that Satan's reign may being let loose will bring, then you'd better know Jesus Christ in your life at the moment. A lesson learned the hard way by one of my missionary friends. He went to Thailand, he went to Vietnam as a missionary, and he came back and he said, John, I'm going to have to change my end times view. He'd gone over there very premillennial, etc., almost typical Plymouth Brethren sort of outlook. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, the Christians over there are sure they're in the tribulation. They're in jail, they're being persecuted, they're being killed, they're losing their jobs, right? And they were reading that as part of the tribulation that's in the book of scripture, in the scriptures. And I have learned good lessons over the years. Most of us, sadly, it's almost impossible for us to avoid. We tend to read the end of the book of Revelation in the light of our current political scene, right? So be careful you don't do that. It's just as easy for those in geology to read Genesis in the light of the current geological thinking, rather than say, okay, Lord, what did you mean by making the plants and commanding them bring forth? Did you use supernatural formative processes, or is there no reference to that? Right. So that's a key principle to learn from most of the debates about end times. I'll talk to Jace about whether he's brave enough to do something as a whole program on end times, and you keep watching until then.
Right, we've got a donation here from Neil Grindley for £10, 10 British buckaroos. That's going to be a new thing for me, is trying to make every single currency in the world as buckaroos. That's going to be a new challenge. But yes, thank you so much, Neil. That's very kind of you. God bless. I personally have a question for Dan, would you believe? So I had a notification earlier from Sky News of we've got a few cases in the UK of what's called Lassa fever. So I was wondering if you could possibly explain in loose terms what Lassa fever is and how it relates to creation, and how it demonstrates the good to bad to worse, if that makes sense.
Yes, well, all infectious diseases are a good example of creation, good to bad to worse, because we have to remember that microbes were originally part of that good creation. So bacteria, viruses, and various other microbes with funny names like rickettsia and things that we call parasites these days, like microscopic worms. All of those things were part of the original creation. Now, what's happened is that our relationship with them has gone wrong. We actually live with gazillions of microbes in our intestines, in our throat, in the all of those surfaces which potentially are exposed to the outside world, and that's now become called the microbiome. All right, so that's microbes that live with us and live with us in peace. Now, as things have gone downhill, our immune systems are no longer quite as clever at sorting out which ones we can live in peace with, which ones have to be expelled back out into the outside world. And also the microbes have degenerated, and some of them have become parasites. And if they end up getting into the wrong place, they will just stay. So if some microbes, if they get past those body surfaces and into your blood, they think, well, this is a great place. This is a 5-star hotel. I'm not moving here. I'm not moving out of here until I'm injected by some medicine. And so that's when we get sick, because microbes have ended up in the wrong place. So all of those, particularly those tropical sounding fevers where you've got lots of microbes, because it's a good place for microbes to live. So anything that's called something or other fever, yes, it's an infectious disease where microbes have ended up in the wrong place, and our immune systems, which have gone downhill, are unable to deal with them straight away. So the microbes get a hold in this nice place and they will keep on multiplying. So it's a mixture of our degeneration, the microbes' degeneration, the environment's degeneration. So yes,
Diane,
any infectious disease, good example of the world going from good to bad, and sadly it's still going downhill until God makes that new heavens and the new earth, and then it'll all be back to being very good.
Okay, you and I prepared a video for David Attenborough and also for a Seventh-day Adventist medical conference in England. And we filmed both of them, and they are available on our streaming site. Did a Good God Make Bad Bugs, this one, and it was personally handed to David Attenborough because of his criticism of Christianity as why would God make bad bugs when he actually didn't. And secondly, the other one was called The Real History of Worms and Germs, which is more for lay people, but they are available from streaming. So Sam can put all that stuff up there that you can get. There are still, for those of you who don't yet know about streaming, there's a few videos left in our stock for some of these until they run out. We will actually still make those available. I think they're only in the Australian office at present. But given my wife having been sick, and I'm going to have to go and visit her at the hospital shortly, one of the things that has really struck me when we deal with sickness is the first symptom my wife showed the first night she had an attack and we didn't know what it was. Her temperature skyrocketed, right? And she became so hot, she became delirious. Her brain wouldn't function properly, right? And she was sweating. Now, one of the things I've learned the hard way, because I've traveled all over the world, and I still remember having to go to the doctor and say, I'm visiting this island, this country. What needles do I need? And an evil grin came on his face. And he said, you need them all. Right now, he said, once I give you this, you've got 20 minutes to get home or you won't be going home. Right. And he was right. I hit the doorstep and I just about collapsed as all of these, they were basically tricking my system into thinking it had mild cases of typhoid fever and you name it. And my temperature went up, but nowhere near as much as my wife's. Point I'm making, you see, the God who created not only made everything good, not only knew enough about us to openly state that Christ was sacrificed before the foundation of the world. Tough thinking, folks. But it meant also he built mechanisms into our body to deal with infection, because one reason, Diane, you might want to confirm this too, for those temperatures skyrocketing is just not so you're sick. It's actually to put to death those invaders in your body so that it will actually help control. That's correct, Diane?
Yeah, it's part of the response to getting rid of those invaders.
So in other words, God forethought the coming of disease, and we don't like to think about these issues, but it is in Scripture, and we need to actually acknowledge our God is way beyond just our planning. Oh, if I do A, B might happen. If I do C, that'll be okay. No, God's planning is everywhere from A to Z, backwards, forwards, upside down, inside out, and every possible combination. So he is a great God, a great Savior, a great Lord. Serve him and give him the praise. Sam, I think our time's just about up.
Yes, we've got a brief question that's come in from I've lost the name. They've asked Neil Grindley has asked, has Joe got a new laptop yet?
No, he hasn't. So I'd encourage you to keep sending the donations in. Sum total of donations is whatever was donated last week so far, Sam, I believe. We haven't had any personal email out in the UK. We're looking forward to doing that as ministry kicks off again. So I'd encourage you. You got, what's a new laptop? $4,000, £2,000 or something to do the sort of thing Joe needs to do. So
I think it depends what you need it to do. I think you can definitely
we need to do all of this. That's the problem.
Right.
So
okay,
Joe has to do all of this from anywhere in England. So yeah.
Yeah.
So that's it. So thank you, Sam, Neil, for your coming donation.
Yes, indeed. I think we'll probably leave that question for next time, Michael. That's a bit more of an in-depth topic, so I'll make sure to save that, and we'll answer that as the first question next week for you. So thank you so much for that. So thank you so much, guys, for joining. It's been a pleasure having you. Apologies for the technical problems. I'm just taking a picture of that now. So there we go. Right. I've got that saved for you, Michael. So we'll definitely have that next week. So thank you very much for joining. It's been great to have you all here. Any last words, John, Diane?
No, just goodbye and God bless. It's been great to be with you. Pray for me. It's going to be a busy few days without my darling wife. And I'm visiting another church tomorrow and talking there. So pray for that. She can come out on Sunday night at the earliest.
Amen. Well, we're certainly hoping for the best for her and praying
Yes.
for a swift recovery. So yes, God bless, guys. Thank you for joining, and we'll see you next time.